recovered. There have been 9,000 deaths in this country. Dr. Joanne Langley is a medical professor at Dalhousie University and co-chairs Canada's Vaccine Task Force. She says vaccine options need to be kept open because some of them just won't work. Here's CBC National Affairs editor Chris Hall.
Countries around the world are racing to lock up supplies of potential COVID-19 vaccines even before they're proven to work. Canada is no exception, announcing deals this week with 2 drug manufacturers. But Dr. Joanne Langley says her task force is recommending several more alternatives just in case, and negotiations with those other suppliers continue.
So that if one or 2 of them fails, we hope to have a number in our back pocket that we can use.
Procurement Minister Anita Anand says the government's aware that some vaccines may not work, but Anand is not willing to say whether these vaccines should be mandatory.
It's a whole of government discussion and a discussion with the provinces and territories as they oversee healthcare. So it would be imprudent if I simply laid down an answer right now.
Langley says she's confident an effective vaccine will be found, even if it's not in time for an expected second wave this fall. Chris Hall, CBC News, Ottawa.
The latest case of COVID-19 in Newfoundland and Labrador has been tied to a TV production. It's the first new infection in the province in almost 2 weeks. As Peter Cowan reports, producers of the show Hudson and Rex believe they can continue the production.
It's a highly trained law enforcement animal.
The TV show Hudson and Rex is now in its 3rd season. It was one of the first TV shows in Canada to resume production last month. Newfoundland and Labrador has had very few active cases of COVID-19, and with most of the cast and crew living in the province, the producers felt it was safe to start. Crew wear masks, actors are physically distant. Paul Pope is one of the show's producers. He says it has changed how the show is filmed.
So it's slower. It's definitely cleaner. It's the cleanest bathrooms, locations, and sets that I've ever been on.
The woman who tested positive flew in on Thursday from Toronto and was immediately tested. She's now in isolation, and Pope says very few other people will need to be tested. Newfoundland and Labrador continues to ban people from outside Atlantic Canada from coming to the province. This woman received an exemption from the Chief Medical Officer of Health in order to come and be part of the show. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
Sound of a massive tornado that touched down yesterday evening near the town of Virden, Manitoba, 3 hours west of Winnipeg. No confirmed reports of serious injuries from officials, but the air ambulance team STARS was deployed when it happened. Storm chasers also reported seeing damage to vehicles and farm buildings, with at least one person reported trapped in a Jeep that was overturned. The images of that twister in Manitoba last night, just stunning. Internationally, officials in the Somali capital say a suspected suicide car bomb this morning has hit a military base near Mogadishu Stadium. Images appear to show a cloud billowing into the sky, towering over nearby buildings. Police say at least 8 people were killed in the blast. More than a dozen have been injured. The U.S. National Counterintelligence and Security Center releasing a warning saying foreign powers, including the governments of Russia, Iran, and China, are already attempting to influence the upcoming U.S. election, alleging that the Russian government once again appears to favor Donald Trump, while the Chinese government does not.
China would love us to have an election where Donald Trump lost to Sleepy Joe Biden. They would dream. They would own our country. If Joe Biden was president, China would own our country.
And at the Stanley Cup qualifiers in Toronto last night.
Riley holds the puck in. Centering pass, Tavares right in front, big shot, score!
The Leafs are still in after being down 3 goals. They came back 5 minutes left on the clock against the Columbus Blue Jackets, forcing that game 5. The Canadiens won their series against the Penguins, while the Oilers have been eliminated by the Blackhawks.
From CTV News at 6:44 a.m. today.
Hello, I'm Andrea Bain from the CTV Newsroom in Toronto. Here are the top stories. Canada is planning $3.6 billion in retaliation for U.S. President Donald Trump's new 10% tariffs on Canadian aluminum. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says Canada's intent is to have the strongest possible impact south of the border. And at least 18 people are dead and another 123 people injured after an Air India Express flight skidded off a runway and broke in 2. The plane was carrying Indians who had been stranded abroad because of COVID-19 when it crashed in Calicut on Friday. And an international aid conference will be held Sunday to support Lebanon in the aftermath of the Beirut explosion. New documents show warnings were raised at least 10 times over 6 years about the massive stockpile of explosive chemicals that were being stored in Beirut's port, but authorities did nothing until this week's deadly explosion. At least 154 people were killed and more than 5,000 people were injured. And back home, Environment Canada says a tornado touched down in southern Manitoba Friday evening in Scarth, south of Vernon. Witnesses say 2 vehicles were thrown from the highway. One person had to be freed from one of the vehicles and was taken to a nearby hospital. For all the day's top stories and breaking news as it happens, tune to CTV News Channel or go online to ctvnews.ca. I'm Andrea Bain.
From CNBC Tech Check at 3:09 p.m. yesterday.
I'm Aditi Roy, and here's your CNBC Tech Check. President Trump issuing executive orders banning U.S. transactions with Chinese tech firms Tencent and ByteDance. Tencent is the parent company of the Chinese messaging app WeChat, and ByteDance, of course, owns TikTok. The order will take effect in 45 days. The scope of the ban remains unclear, but may attract retaliation from Beijing. TikTok responding to that ban and threatening legal action. The social media app claiming there has been no due process or adherence to the law from the Trump administration. TikTok has been at the center of an escalating technology war between the U.S. and China. Washington had already threatened to ban TikTok in the U.S. due to national security concerns. And Uber reporting its second quarter results Thursday. Revenue from ride-sharing took a dive. Gross bookings were down 73% as the pandemic limited people's travel. However, Uber's food delivery business more than doubled. The company has yet to reach profitability, but it says it will reach that milestone by sometime in 2021. Shares of Uber falling 5% Friday morning. That's all from the West Coast. See you back here on Monday.
From DW News Brief at 7 a.m. today.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Mandatory coronavirus testing has begun for travelers arriving in Germany from parts of the world deemed high risk. Testing stations are open at arrival terminals as concerns grow that a second wave of pandemic may be hitting Germany, with new cases rising to over 1,000 per day. At least 18 people were killed and more than 100 injured when a passenger plane skidded off the runway in heavy rain in the southern Indian city of Kozhikode. The Air India Express flight from Dubai was repatriating Indians stranded by the COVID-19 pandemic. 190 passengers and crew were aboard. In Beirut, a big cleanup effort is underway as the city tries to recover from the huge explosions that ripped it apart. The UN is warning of an impending humanitarian catastrophe in the whole of Lebanon. Beirut's port was destroyed, and authorities are now worried about maintaining food stocks. This is DW News from Berlin. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at DW News or visit our website, dw.com.
Multiple United Nations agencies have issued warnings about the situation in Lebanon, days after a massive explosion ripped through Beirut's port. Tuesday's blast left nearly 150 people dead and thousands of others wounded. A spokesperson for the World Food Program said the event may, quote, exacerbate an already grim food security situation. And a spokesman for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees said the destruction is on a massive scale.
Hundreds of thousands of people have had their homes completely or partially damaged in the explosion, so the need for shelter is massive. UNHCR is making available its in-country stocks of shelter kits, plastic sheets, rug hauls, and tens of thousands of other core relief items, including blankets and mattresses for immediate distribution.
Lebanon's news agency reports a military judge leading the investigation into the blast said 16 employees of Beirut's port had been detained. He said 18 had been questioned, including port and customs officials. At least 15 people are dead and multiple others injured after an Air India Express flight skidded off the runway while landing in heavy fog. Flight 1344 originated in Dubai and was scheduled to land in the southern Indian state of Kerala. The flight reportedly overshot the runway and broke into two before coming to rest in a nearby valley. Most passengers were workers returning home after being laid off due to the coronavirus pandemic. Meantime, a grim milestone in India. Health officials say the country has surpassed more than 2 million coronavirus cases. More than 41,000 Indians have died. The spike comes as about 600,000 community women health volunteers went on strike, complaining they were ill-equipped to respond to the wave of infections. India has the third highest caseload in the world behind the United States and Brazil. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
I'll be right back. How do I do this?
Bazillion. It's in partnership with the people at Brains On. Million Bazillion is a new podcast for kids, but also their families. It's all about money, how it works, how we use it, where it comes from, and how we could all get a little bit smarter about it, but in a fun way. Million Bazillion, helping dollars make more sense. Listen and subscribe wherever you listen and subscribe.
President Trump is making good on his threat to crack down on two popular Chinese-owned social media apps. He's signed executive orders banning TikTok and WeChat from operating in the U.S. within 45 days unless they're sold.
The president is at war with TikTok. He's threatening to ban the social media platform, best known for bringing the youngs together to lip sync and dance in harmony. But there might be a way out.
A source confirms to NBC News that Microsoft is in talks to purchase it from its Chinese owner. TikTok has 100 million users in the United States, but President Trump is not one of them.
TikTok on the clock.
I'm Amina Al-Sadi.
I'm Paul Mounsey.
I'm Cecilia Lay.
I'm Halima Shah.
I'm Mood Sadie.
I'm Afim Shapiro.
I'm Bridget McCarthy.
I'm Noam Hassenfeld.
I'm Jillian Weinberger.
I'm Liz Kelly Nelson.
I'm the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder.
And I'm Sean Rameswaram. That story is ahead on Today Explained. Shireen Ghaffari, you've been covering TikTok for Recode and Vox. How far back does the president's beef with this social media platform go?
So the beef with TikTok goes, somewhat far back because as early as last year, the U.S. government has been investigating TikTok over national security concerns.
A company compromised by the Chinese Communist Party knows where your children are, knows what they look like, what their voices sound like, what they're watching, and what they share with each other.
So, for a while now, there's been this kind of floating concern in national security circles that is something going on with TikTok that the government should be worried about. But Trump has really escalated the attacks on TikTok this summer.
We're looking at TikTok. We may be banning TikTok. We may be doing some other things. There are a couple of options.
And so did Pompeo.
The mission set is to protect American national security, and in this case, the information of American citizens. And so whether it's TikTok or any of the other Chinese communications platforms, apps, infrastructure, this administration has taken seriously the requirement to protect.
And now, he's said that again with kind of increased urgency.
And why exactly does President Trump have this increasing beef with TikTok? Does it have anything to do with that rally where turnout was kind of low and the TikTok teens claimed responsibility?
So it's hard to say exactly what is making Trump escalate the attacks, but it is true that back in June, the New York Times reported that teenage TikTok users pranked Trump in this epic way, and that they said they were going to attend his rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and signed up an online form saying they were going to attend, but then didn't show up on purpose.
Guys, Donald Trump is having a rally next week, and it's free. All you have to do is give your phone number, and you can get 2 tickets. So I got 2 tickets, but I totally forgot that I have to pick every individual piece of lint off of my room floor and sort them by size, so I can't make it for Friday. Oh, well, I already got the tickets.
And if you remember, that was a rally that Trump was expecting a really large turnout for. He didn't sort of get the turnout that his team was expecting.
The city's fire marshal estimated attendance at 6,200. The arena holds 19,000. And the campaign had boasted 1 million had requested tickets.
These teens basically took credit for that, at least in part, and said that they helped kind of falsely inflate the attendance numbers that Trump was expecting. You could see how, that may have irked someone. So who knows? Hard to say if that's the thing that really made Trump upset. There are larger and serious national security concerns predating this rally, and it's hard to say how much exactly the TikTok teens were really the ones responsible for that lower than expected turnout. But it's certainly, TikTok has been a place where the kids have been sort of poking fun at Trump and trying to be a thorn in his side.
I mean, we laugh about the president's numbers at this Tulsa rally, but is there a chance that there could be some sort of election interference via TikTok? Is there a chance that this might have something to do with the 2020 election?
I've definitely heard the worry that because so many young people are engaged on TikTok and they're getting their information there, that if there were to be some kind of misinformation campaign by a foreign government, that TikTok would be a place where they could, try to exploit these young people's eyeballs. The most serious proven concern I've seen about TikTok so far has been that the app was storing people's clipboard data, which means when you go in to copy paste something on your phone, that TikTok, as part of its permissions that you give an app, as the security permissions, it was storing that and receiving that data. And then it wasn't just TikTok; a bunch of other apps also have been found to do this. And once it was brought to TikTok's attention, they said they stopped doing it. So that's been kind of the most serious concern that I've seen that's proven so far. And about these bigger, can TikTok, mess with the elections? I think all of that at this point is speculation. But it's certainly there, and it's certainly being used by President Trump as a way to show that he is getting tougher on China, right? And that this election is definitely one of the themes of it is going to be, U.S. versus China, and which potential president is tougher on that in 2020.
What about concerns over free speech on TikTok? There's been allegations that they're censoring stuff, right?
So there's a lot of concerns, a lot of allegations, but not a whole lot is really proven yet. What has been the cause for some concern is that if you remember the Hong Kong independence protests when they were really heating up about a year ago, a Washington Post report looked into how much content would show up on TikTok when you searched for a hashtag like Free Hong Kong. And they found that there was not a whole lot showing up. Now, TikTok has denied that was because of any kind of censorship. It may have been the case that just people on TikTok were not as interested in the Hong Kong protests. But other examples, we did see there was a report in The Guardian that there were some content moderation guidelines that TikTok was using that sort of discouraged content moderators from letting content stay up that's about things like Tiananmen Square. And so it seemed like, at least from those guidelines that were leaked, that content moderators were kind of taking down content that may have been anti-China. But again, content moderation guidelines can be, really broad, and it's not necessarily true that it was just about the China content. So without having full access to the extent of all the behind the scenes content moderation operations of TikTok, we can't really say for sure if they're only, if they're single-handedly doing the Chinese government's work of trying to moderate or take down things that upset the government.
So we don't know for sure whether TikTok is harvesting Americans' data, and it sounds like we don't even really know for sure whether TikTok is intentionally and purposefully censoring anti-Chinese speech on its platform, though there are some hints that it might be. But we do know for certain that the president has signed this executive order to ban this app within 45 days. And something like that has never happened before, right?
No, it is. This would represent if TikTok did somehow get banned, that would really be an unprecedented kind of restriction of the free and open internet as we know it in the U.S. I mean, something like that has just really never happened before. We've seen more like business kind of Chinese operations, such as like the Huawei. But that's a lot different than banning a consumer app that 100 million U.S. users use.
There might be a way to save TikTok. More with Shireen after the break.
My name is Matt Little. I'm a state senator for District 58 in Minnesota. I use TikTok because it's an extension of how I communicated with people when I was mayor of Lakeville. My mantra was that I will communicate with you on whatever platform you want to communicate on. So if you sent me a letter to my office, I'd send you a letter back. Email to email, call to call. And now TikTok, because younger generations want to talk and interact and do politics on TikTok. What's up, political TikTok? It's Matt Little, your favorite state senator. I always get asked the question, like, what is the best way to make change, if I'm in high school? And what I would say is, don't send a message to your... If TikTok went away, it's just like Vine going away. People adapt. There will always be another social media app that hits it big. And so I think if you're in politics and you want to talk to the next generation or different audiences, you got to be ready. So as soon as we got the threat of the ban a week ago, we signed up for Byte, Dubsmash, Triller. We'll be ready on whatever's next. Before I take all the credit for this, I want to make sure that I thank my two staff people that helped me a lot with my TikTok account, and their names are Amy and Christian. Please make sure to give them some love, too, for having to film all these ridiculous videos.
Support for the show today comes from the Michelle Obama podcast, which is out now on Spotify and just Spotify. So don't go looking for it wherever you get your podcasts. This one isn't there. It's just on Spotify, okay? The series brings listeners inside the former First Lady's most candid and personal conversations, showing...
It says you have to be doing X. I just
states that TikTok would be banned in 45 days if it is not sold by their Chinese-owned parent company, ByteDance. And there happens to be a U.S. company that wants to buy TikTok. Why does Microsoft want to buy TikTok?
So TikTok is a wildly popular app. It has become kind of the crown jewel for social media companies because it's one of the most quickly growing and most downloaded apps. So, of course, Microsoft, a company that doesn't have a popular social media presence, would want to gobble it up.
And how popular is it, for those who aren't aware?
So TikTok says they have about 100 million users in the U.S. and hundreds of millions across the world.
Is this like a really easy way for Microsoft to shore up some cool points and be known, by the youths for something other than like Bill Gates supposedly inventing the coronavirus or whatever?
It is true that Microsoft doesn't have that shiny, young, hot social media app in its portfolio the way that Facebook has Instagram and Google has YouTube and, Twitter is Twitter. So Microsoft doesn't have that, and TikTok could be the way to kind of make Microsoft cool again.
Could Microsoft make TikTok uncool? No shade to Microsoft, but I mostly think about like Windows XP Pro or something when I think about Microsoft.
What? You don't remember Clippy? Clippy isn't cool?
Clippy actually underrated. Yeah, no, I remember Clippy for sure. I fuck with Clippy.
I think that there's definitely that risk, right? We're already seeing like a lot of younger users on TikTok worry that Microsoft's going to mess it up. It won't be the same. And if if the kids don't think it's cool, it won't be cool. So it definitely, Microsoft runs a risk of like messing up TikTok's brand. However, Microsoft has bought independent companies that, and let them continue to run pretty independently and still keep their user base, like the code platform GitHub or the video game Minecraft. Those actually are companies that are now owned by Microsoft, but you probably, you may not know that if you're not following it closely.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, and now ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, might be forced to sell TikTok to Microsoft. How might that forced sale work?
Right, so it's complicated. Independently of Trump, there's actually this interagency government committee called the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And they've been investigating TikTok for a year now and trying to see if those national security concerns are legitimate, and they have the power to actually block business deals involving foreign companies like ByteDance in the U.S. So ByteDance acquired they acquired another company called Musical.ly back in 2017. Musical.ly is also based in China, but ByteDance bought their U.S. based operations as well and took in all their U.S. users and kind of rebranded Musical.ly as TikTok, which has become the wildly popular app we know and love today. So this committee that's looking into the national security concerns, they actually have the power to undo that deal. And they have blocked and undone major deals before. For example, last year, they forced the popular dating app Grindr to not sell to a Chinese-based company.
So this government organization, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or maybe just CFIUS, which sounds kind of like an STD, isn't just blocking a deal here. It's sort of creating one out of thin air. Does ByteDance have a choice in whether it sells to TikTok or not?
Well, there's a lot going on. So it's not just the CFIUS committee, but it's also President Trump, publicly threatening repeatedly to ban TikTok. It's, bipartisan senators sending letters that they're concerned about this and they think that Congress should investigate this. So, there's a whole flurry of political drama going on that's essentially forcing the potential deal we're seeing now with Microsoft buying TikTok's U.S. operations from ByteDance. And of course, ByteDance would rather just keep TikTok running the way it is. And ByteDance's CEO has come out and said he thinks that the ultimate goal of the U.S. government here is to ban TikTok in the U.S. in a memo to his Chinese staff that was reported on. So, this is not an ideal situation for TikTok's owners, but this is the political reality that they're dealing with.
Which is sell to Microsoft or get banned.
Right, and not just sell to Microsoft, but sell to Microsoft under conditions that the U.S. government and Trump agrees to. So Trump has given this deadline of 45 days for them to sort it out. So it's by September 15th. And if they feel that Microsoft can't do enough to protect U.S. user data and the U.S. national security interests, then, the U.S. government can block that deal and potentially still try to somehow ban or really limit TikTok's U.S. business.
So how much do you get to sell your company for when, the U.S. government is forcing your hand?
So right now, as last reported by CNBC, Microsoft's looking at buying TikTok for $10 to $30 billion. And that might sound like a lot, but remember that TikTok is a hugely valuable company. It has 100 million, of the kind of users that advertisers really want, which are largely young, which are engaged and creative.
And that's in the United States alone.
And that's in the U.S. alone, right? And so the company was last valued at around $80 billion in the last investor round of TikTok. And now that was for TikTok International, I believe, not just for the U.S. So it may make sense that Microsoft is going to buy only the U.S. part of TikTok's users for a lower number, but it's very much, again, not the kind of deal that ByteDance even wanted to be making at this point in the first place.
And the president hinted that, the U.S. government will take a cut of whatever this deal is. Is he aware of how this works? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so in kind of an unprecedented statement, President Trump said that if this deal were to happen, the U.S. government needs to get a cut.
Because we're making it possible. Without us, I use the expression, it's like the landlord and the tenant. and without the lease, the tenant doesn't have the value. Well, we're sort of, in a certain way, the lease. We make it possible to have this great success.
And, you know, people were kind of perplexed by what he meant by that, because that's kind of just, it's not standard. That's probably illegal, and some say unconstitutional. And, you know, some people have compared it to kind of borderline extortion. And of course, that's just what Trump said. You know, he hasn't actually done anything. But, you know, some people think that he may have been referring to a kind of sales fee that the U.S. Treasury does make on some of these deals. But that's a standard fee, and it's not something that's negotiable or that you would kind of announce as being an amount that the government has to kind of get out of you for the sale to go through.
So the president's executive order says that TikTok must be sold in 45 days or the app will be banned. Can he actually ban an entire social media platform?
You know, it's complicated. He can't certainly press a button and turn it off overnight. I mean, even if he wanted to do something like that, the quickest probably way to do it would be to get Apple or Android, which is owned by Google, right? The major kind of mobile phone app platforms to just remove TikTok from their app store. But that's not something that's really ever been done for political reasons in the U.S. like that at the request of a president. And it's not something that Apple or Google, especially Apple, which has been so guarded about the independence of its app store, not something that Apple's just going to say yes to even if Trump wanted. So, you know, there's going to be a flurry of legal and political challenges here if Trump did try to kind of institute this unprecedented presidential ban on a major consumer app. However, he can make life a lot harder for TikTok, and he can do that legally because of these national security concerns. You know, he has the support of not just some Republicans, but also some Democrats in looking into what's going on with TikTok in China. And that committee we talked about, CFIUS, they can basically force, you know, TikTok to break off its U.S. operations. And there's other ways. I mean, he can issue an executive order. He can use emergency economic powers. Trump can do a lot of things to kind of essentially try to sanction or just limit the business power of TikTok.
What would it mean for 100 million U.S. users? What would it mean for the country?
I mean, I think it would mean that there's going to be a serious change in just the openness of the internet in the U.S. as we know it. And while there may be valid national security concerns, there's also really big concerns about if that's going to give a kind of dangerous precedent for any president of the U.S. to just ban or turn off an app that they don't like. And so that's why you're seeing the ACLU and other civil liberties organizations come out and say that they're against any kind of unilateral ban by President Trump on TikTok or consumer apps in the manner that he seems to be suggesting.
It's kind of amazing how this app that's brought us so many videos of teens dancing to popular songs could end up being this sort of litmus test for our tolerance of free speech in America.
You have to remember that there's been increasing tensions between China and the U.S., and it's not just about TikTok, it's about the entire technology sector and who's really going to be the number one power in the years to come in tech. Is it going to be the U.S.? Is it going to be China? This is about a lot more than TikTok.
Shireen Ghaffari writes about technology for Vox. You're listening to Today Explained.
My name is Jessica Fisher. I'm a TikToker. My TikTok @ is JessFisher5. And I make all sorts of TikToks. They often have to do with being queer and or zodiac signs. I was at a store today and this girl complimented my blouse. I don't think it's an especially cute blouse, but she complimented me and I was like, is she hitting on me? How does she know?
To download and start streaming now.
My name is Habib Attah. I'm a journalist living and working in Beirut. On Tuesday afternoon, I was driving home, passing by the port of Beirut, as I have done so many times before. There was a bit of traffic, and I had pulled over about 4 or 5 kilometers after the port on the highway, and went to a pharmacy to buy some medicine. When I was talking to the pharmacist, I heard a
like a pop noise, and I immediately had, when I heard it, I looked to the skies because I thought that it could be another airstrike. You know, we've been through so many airstrikes in this country. We've been hit with so many tons of bombs that I thought it was coming from the air. And then, you know, I didn't see anything, so I turned around. That was the initial explosion, and then the much bigger mushroom cloud happened just within 10 seconds or so after that. My whole body shook, and it really rattled me to my bones. It's hard to really describe what it's like. It's kind of like if you were trying to imagine the biggest explosion in an action movie, an unreal feeling. And even though I was several kilometers away at this point, I felt like the building next to me was falling down. And everybody felt that. Everybody felt that the explosion was happening in their house. That's how it reverberated across the city. We experienced probably the biggest explosion of our lives here in Lebanon, and that's saying a lot. You know, we've seen bunker-busting bombs used by Israel. We've seen the assassination of the prime minister with huge amounts, tons of TNT. But this was something that was probably the closest thing to an atomic bomb people have seen in recent memory. It was a mushroom cloud that enveloped the whole city of Beirut.
So that was about 24 hours ago now. Habib, do you have any idea what exactly happened on Tuesday?
We don't know a lot of things, as usual in Lebanon. We don't really always know what's happening, and it's very early. Obviously, it's still smoldering, the area. But the explosion happened at the port of Beirut. Apparently, there was a warehouse full of highly flammable ammonium nitrate, apparently, which is a very dangerous gas that could have been used for fertilizer. We're not sure what its purpose was, but it was being stored in the port for several years. And there were disputes about how to handle it, and it just sat there. We're not really sure how the spark that lit the explosion, where that came from. Some people will say it was foul play, and then that's where we play into everyone's favorite conspiracy. Some will say that it was a missile. Some will say that it was planted. It's hard to blame people for jumping to conclusions. However, these conclusions will often reflect a certain political slant. So there could be many explanations, but it could also most definitely be a case of pure negligence. And I mean, the whole Lebanese state is really a manifestation of negligence. It's also a very tight country. There's a lot of space to put things. People end up putting things and stacking things in ways, whether they're buildings or materials that are very dangerous. We don't have the kind of regulations and inspectors and kind of bodies of oversight that really do due diligence with these kind of things. We've seen gas stations blow up in the past in Lebanon. We've seen factories catch on fire.
Do you have any idea how many lives were lost and how many people were injured at this point?
So far, the estimate is something like 70 dead and 4,000 injured. And these injuries...
4,000? Yes,
and that's, again, initial estimates, and a lot of people couldn't get to hospitals because hospitals were so overwhelmed. 3 hospitals were actually destroyed in the vicinity of the port. We have a struggling healthcare system as it is, but to lose 3 hospitals, that's a major blow. Some of the injuries were really bad. I heard of someone saw a girl lose a limb. I have heard of a man who died from bleeding in his hand because he couldn't reach the hospital in time. He just bled to death. People were just walking around the streets in a daze full of glass and blood. And the biggest devastating epicenter of this was the port of Beirut. It's almost erased. There were dozens of warehouses. They've all been flattened. This is a really big blow to a country that relies on imports. 80% of our consumption is imported. And the port is a lifeline. The port is a vein, an artery of the economy in this country. And this country's economy is tanking, is collapsing right now. And when you take out the port, which is how the country feeds itself, basically, we have the strategic grain silos right there at the port. They were totally eviscerated. That was 3 months worth of bread making at a time when people are really hungry and going hungry in this country. So, I mean, a worse thing couldn't have happened to a place that was worse off.
How do you mean, for people unfamiliar with what's going on in Lebanon right now?
I mean, everybody is saying this is the worst thing that they've ever seen. And we've seen a lot of wars and a lot of destruction in this country, so that says a lot. The port of a country is essential to its economy. So losing the port of Beirut is just crazy to imagine what kind of economic consequence that will have going forward. Losing 3 hospitals at a time of the pandemic, when there are very few hospitals in the country and very few ICU beds, being inundated with so many people. The cost of medicine is very high, so hospitals are running at a loss. Patients aren't able to pay for health care. The government is broke. The government owes the hospitals tons of money. So people urgently need any kind of health care support. They need food support, just basic bread and wheat. Living in Lebanon is so hard, from the power outages to the sewage spilling into the sea, to the air pollution from the diesel generators that are running all the time to support the fact that there's no electricity from the government. People are facing 50% unemployment. So it's hard to imagine what else can we get hit with in this country. I mean, you take all of this economic collapse and environmental disaster, and you throw a kind of atomic bomb in the mix. And so it's really unfortunate for people who live here to have to live through that reality. They didn't choose that. They were born in war, and they never really seem to get a break.
How things got so bad in Lebanon after the break. I'm Sean Rameswaram. It's Today Explained. Have you guys listened to the Michelle Obama podcast yet? Why not? ProElObama.com.
Spotify. The series can be a plays with ourselves and are at Spotify.com.
On Tuesday.
Well, it's hard to imagine what it's like to go through a financial crisis of this scale. I mean, we've been through many political crises, we've been through wars, but this is a different kind of war where basically, the money you have in the bank are just numbers on a screen. And a financial crisis has 3 aspects in Lebanon. It's the banking crisis. We have a debt crisis, which is the country is one of the most indebted in the world, which made the currency crisis. Lebanon's always been a very delicate balance, but it kind of feels like it's really getting torn apart like never before.
You say that this crisis Lebanon's facing economically is sort of 3-pronged. There's this debt crisis, a banking crisis, and a currency crisis. Could we go through each of them, starting with the debt crisis? What's going on there?
Yeah, so Lebanon's one of the world's most indebted countries. It has a debt to GDP ratio of something like 180%. So that means that the country doesn't generate nearly enough money to ever repay its debt. And the debt keeps basically accumulating year after year to the point where it's like almost $100 billion today for a country that makes like $40 billion at best per year. So how do you pay that back? The debt just keeps on growing and growing. Why is Lebanon in so much debt? Well, Lebanon is a country that's been at war for so many years and had a massive civil war that the reconstruction costs were very high, and the borrowing costs, the interest rates for a country like Lebanon to borrow money are also very high. So actually the worse off you are as a country, the more money you're going to spend in borrowing money to get back, because people don't trust you because you have bad credit. So we're like a country with bad credit, emerging from a war with not much infrastructure. So to build that infrastructure, you had to accrue so much more debt. And that debt has been piling and piling and piling.
And that debt crisis has led to a banking crisis?
So the banking crisis is linked to the debt crisis because the banks are the primary lender to the government. So when Lebanon emerged from the war, nobody wanted to lend Lebanon money. So Lebanon ended up taking a lot of money from local banks that charged really high interest rates because they didn't actually have faith in this government. So the government accumulated a lot of money. However, because the government wasn't really making money and because there wasn't really any industry in the country, and people had no incentive to build any industry because the interest rates were so high in the bank, so nothing was being built in the country. And all of that money was being spent by the government because the banks were, again, loaning money to the government for interest rates to make their own profits. So the banks did very well in Lebanon for a long time. But as the political crises, mounted in the country, people started to get nervous about the bank's ability to keep funding the government, about the government's ability to pay the banks back. And the banks started to restrict the amount of money you can withdraw because people started running to the bank and trying to withdraw all of their money. And so that means that now we don't really have access to the money that we put in the bank, our deposits. We can only access a small allowance, which could be a few $100 a month.
And then I guess that brings us to the currency crisis.
Yeah, not only are you not able to get cash from the bank very easily in any great amount, but the cash that you do get is worth 20 cents to the dollar. So if you had $1 in your pocket, that's 20 cents you have now. If you had $100, that's $20. So it's a massive blow to anyone, right? And that also applies to your salary. Like whatever you make every month, cut that down by 80%. Add to this that when you go to the store to buy groceries, everything is like doubled and tripled the price. So things like a bag of shredded cheese you might buy to make a quesadilla or something, right? That what used to cost like $6 or $7, and now it's the equivalent of like $20 or $30. All of these crises are inherently linked.
How are people responding to this three-pronged crisis?
Well, people are really, really suffering. I mean, if your salary gets cut by 80% and the prices of goods go up, you kind of worry about how you're going to feed your children. So people have been selling items. There have been like some websites where people are selling like their household items, even dishes I've seen for sale, or bartering. Crime has gone up. There was a viral video circulating in Lebanon of a guy who held up a pharmacy with a gun to buy diapers.
I've never seen that. Let me look it up. Oh yeah, this is like the most passive robbery you could imagine. The guy's holding a gun, but he seems pretty resigned. They're putting the diapers in the bag, and he's slowly walking out.
People are really suffering on a daily just to get by, just to get a meal. About half of the country now is under the poverty level. And of course, the COVID outbreak has definitely made everything worse because people can't get to their jobs. We've had a lot of lockdowns, and we're going into another lockdown right now. There's a lot of depression. There was some suicides related to the financial situation as well. So people are very anxious. They're very worried about their future, about their children. They're trying to escape this country, as they have always done. For decades, people have tried to escape Lebanon, and that's why we have so many Lebanese living abroad, and immigrants and refugees. So yeah, it's definitely leading people to give up hope. And it's also much harder for the poorest segments of Lebanese society. Not only have the middle class become poor, but the poor have become, extremely impoverished.
Late last year, we covered the protests in Lebanon over this WhatsApp tax the government tried to impose. To some degree, those protests were successful. The tax didn't happen. The prime minister resigned. After everything that's happened since, do people still have hope they can affect change in the country, or are people giving up?
It's very difficult to dig yourself out of a deep hole. And I think it's also very difficult to reimagine a political system that has been in the making for decades. And a lot of people rely on it and believe in it. And so the only solution to Lebanon is for the IMF to loan Lebanon more money. And again, that means more debt. So the best solution would be for Lebanon to start generating income, to start building industries. But it doesn't really have the infrastructure for that because, again, it's a war-torn country. So another problem that Lebanon faces is that, Lebanon decisions are not made only in Lebanon. The United States, backs certain leaders in Lebanon. Iran backs certain groups in Lebanon. France, Saudi Arabia, they all have their favorites. So Lebanon is kind of like an international chessboard. where, for decades now, different countries have tried to support different sides. And so I think in some ways Lebanon is like a country that's unfinished. It's not really formed yet. And that formation of any country, I think, revolves around one side winning, one side emerging victorious to lead a country, usually at a great cost of violence. Well, we had all the violence in Lebanon, but nobody won. So Lebanon's a country of no winners and no losers, this is kind of democratic because everybody gets a say, or a lot of political parties get a say, but nothing really gets done in the country. So it's really hard to imagine a way out of it other than getting more debt to try to restructure the debt, for the umpteenth time, and passing on this debt to the next generation. Although people are not really willing to lend Lebanon money either, because they've seen so much money in the country disappear. So it's real tragedy, I think, for the people who live here, who just wake up every day and that's where they are. I mean, they didn't decide, on lending rates. They didn't decide on taking out those loans. They're just average people who are now suffering under the worst economic crisis. So we could see violence, and at the same time, there is violence on our border. There is, ongoing confrontation between Hezbollah and Israel, and that's been going on for years. That could flare up at any time. That has flared up in the past into great wars that have set the country back further. I think that people are trying to be creative. They're trying to start out small industries. They're trying to go back to farming. Lebanon is the country in the Middle East that has, rivers and valleys and greenery. Around us are a lot of deserts, and so it's a very fertile crescent. It's where farming started thousands of years ago. It's a beautiful country for tourism. It's a gorgeous country for history. Every part of the world has been here. You've got Roman temples that look better than the ones in Rome, preserved. And my heart goes out to people that are really at the margin of society right now, because they're really suffering badly. And I would just say, if people want to help out, they could visit the country. They could try, to help people out here, because again, it's a great country. It's a hidden gem. Unfortunately, politically, it's not been able to get a break and a rest from the powers that be, whether they're local or foreign.
All right, Habib, that's all we need. I really appreciate it. And we watched these videos in shock yesterday, and I just really hope things get better. And if anything, I guess one positive outlook of this is that the world is paying attention right now. So I hope good things come of that.
I hope so too. Some people have said this could be a catalyst for change, but I think people are so exhausted and worn down at this point. They just need all the help that they can get.
Habib Battah is an independent journalist and the founder of BeirutReport.com, where you can find and support his work. COVID-19, am I right? A few months ago, the entire world watched bodies pile up in New York City. We read about doctors and nurses losing their lives. It was harrowing. And all the while, we saw images of people in Florida.
There we go. I can turn the volume down. Alright, without getting my hand on the screen all the time. Hey guys, how's it going? We did it again. We did yoga, the news, and Today Explained. 2 episodes, all while high. Now, isn't that just phenomenal? All we need now is an aspiration. To pick up apples in the backyard and put them in a basket, or not to pick up apples in the backyard and put them in a basket. Noodle, don't noodle. You're too worried about what once was and not what will be. However, there's a saying, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. But today is a gift. That is what I call the present. Guys, thank you so much for joining. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to y'all